He gave me a vintage Porsche for our 1-month anniversary. For our 6-month, a first-class trip around the world. He said I was his muse, his everything, and I believed him. But the thing about a fairy tale is that there's always a monster, and by the time I realized I was trapped in the castle, he already had the key to my mind. He called it love. His family's lawyer would later call it something else entirely. And this story, the real story, doesn't start with the gifts or the private jets. It starts in a dusty, paint-splattered loft in Brooklyn with a leaky faucet and a stack of unpaid invoices. That was my kingdom. My name is Alara. I'm a graphic artist, or I was, and my life was my own. It was messy and chaotic, and I was perpetually broke, but it was mine. The air smelled like turpentine and possibility. I had a tight-knit group of friends who were more like family, and we'd get by on cheap pizza and big dreams. Was I lonely sometimes? Yes. I'm a romantic. I paint epic, sweeping landscapes, and I guess a part of me was always waiting for a love that felt just as vast. So when Julian walked into that tiny Chelsea gallery where my one and only significant piece was hanging, it felt like destiny. He wasn't just handsome, that's too simple a word. He looked like he was carved from marble by a master who knew a thing or two about cheekbones. But it was his eyes. He didn't just look at my painting. He saw it. He saw me. He talked about the brushstrokes, the color theory, the emotion I had poured into it. He spoke my language. That night, he didn't ask for my number. He bought the painting, for a price that would have covered my rent for a year. The next day, a courier delivered a simple black envelope. Inside was a note, "I'd rather have the artist than the art. Dinner tonight, and a single, perfect gardenia." How do you say no to that? You don't. You fall. And I fell so fast, so completely, I didn't even notice the ground wasn't there anymore. It was the beginning of the most beautiful, intoxicating chapter of my life. Or so I thought. Because when something seems too good to be true, it's usually a lie. And this was the most beautiful lie I had ever seen. If you've ever felt that pull, that feeling that something is almost too perfect, you know what I'm talking about. You're in the right place. Stick with me, because you need to hear how a fairy tale can become a prison, one beautiful lie at a time. And if you want to be part of a community that understands, that believes survivors, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You're not alone here. The first few weeks with Julian were a blur of impossible beauty. He didn't just court me, he curated an entire world for me. One day, a delivery would arrive, not just flowers, but the entire stock of a neighborhood florist, with a note saying he couldn't decide which one you'd like best. Another day, it was a rare first edition book of poetry by an obscure artist I'd mentioned once, in passing. He listened. That was his greatest weapon. He listened with an intensity that made you feel like you were the only person in the universe. He remembered the name of my childhood dog, my favorite type of cloud, the specific shade of blue I loved most. Our dates were like scenes from a movie. Sunset sails around the Statue of Liberty, private viewings at the Met, last-minute flights to Paris just for dinner. He'd hold my hand, look me dead in the eye, and say things like, "I feel like my whole life was in black and white until I met you, Alara." And my heart, my poor, stupid, artist's heart, would just melt. I was living in one of my own paintings. My friends were dazzled. They'd ooh and ah over the stories, the pictures, the gifts. "You landed the freaking prince," my best friend Amelia would say, shaking her head in disbelief. But then, the cage began to form. It started subtly, with my laptop. I had an old, reliable MacBook, covered in stickers and a few dings, that had seen me through countless all-nighters. It was an extension of my arm. One afternoon, a sleek, silver box arrived. Inside was the newest, most powerful machine on the market. "I noticed yours was getting a little slow, my love," Julian said, kissing my forehead. "You're a world-class artist. You deserve world-class tools." It was an impossibly generous gift. But when I went to transfer my files, he'd already had his tech guy do it. All my data, all my work, all my history, seamlessly mirrored onto a new device that he had bought. When I tried to put my old stickers on the new one, he chuckled softly. "Let's keep this one clean, shall we? A fresh start." I put the stickers back in their drawer. Next, it was my phone. My trusty old Android, with its cracked screen and dying battery, was a constant source of frustration, Julian noticed. He presented me with a new iPhone, in a sealed box. "I went ahead and added you to my family plan," he said with a brilliant smile. "It's unlimited everything. You'll never have to worry about data again." It was practical. It was thoughtful. It also meant he was now the account holder for my primary mode of communication. When I asked if I could just get the screen fixed on my old phone, he looked genuinely hurt. "Don't you like it? I just want to take care of you." So, I switched. I ported my number. Another piece of my old, independent life, neatly packed away. The most unsettling part was how he talked about my friends. After a night out with Amelia and the old crew, he'd be quiet on the drive home. "She means well," he'd say about Amelia, "but she's a little coarse, don't you think? Her energy, it doesn't match yours." He'd say it with such gentle concern, as if he was protecting my delicate artistic soul from the harsh realities of the world. He never said, "Don't see her." He'd just plant a seed of doubt. "I worry they don't understand the pressures you're under to create. They just want to party." Slowly, I started making excuses to miss those cheap pizza nights. It was easier than dealing with the quiet disapproval in Julian's eyes. I told myself I was just maturing, growing up. I didn't realize I was being pruned. After 2 months of what I still believed was a whirlwind romance, Julian announced, "It's time for you to meet my mother." He said it with a gravity that told me this was no casual Sunday brunch. This was an event. The way he spoke of his mother, Genevieve, was with a mixture of reverence and something that sounded suspiciously like fear. She was the sun in their family's solar system, and everyone else, including Julian's titangent of industry father, was just a planet caught in her orbit. "She's particular," Julian warned, his hand tightening on mine. "She just wants what's best for us. Her approval means everything." The pressure was immense before I even walked through the door. Their home wasn't a house, it was a statement. A sprawling limestone behemoth on Park Avenue, with a doorman who looked like a retired general. The elevator opened directly into their foyer, a cavernous space with floors of polished black marble, and a single, terrifyingly expensive-looking sculpture under a spotlight. The air was cold and smelled faintly of lemon and money. And there she was, Genevieve. She was tall and slender, dressed in a cream-colored cashmere dress that probably cost more than my entire student debt. Her hair was a helmet of perfect silver, and her eyes, the same unnerving shade of ice blue as Julian's, swept over me from head to toe. It wasn't a greeting, it was an appraisal. "So, this is the artist," she said, her voice as crisp as a $1,000 bill. She didn't offer a hand, just a thin, bloodless smile. Julian, who was usually so confident, seemed to shrink in her presence. He stood a little too straight, laughed a little too loud. Dinner was an exercise in subtle torture. Genevieve asked questions like a prosecuting attorney. "Alara, what an unusual name. Is it short for something?" And when I talked about my art, she'd nod slowly and say, "How lovely, to have a hobby you're so passionate about." Hobby, the word hung in the air, a tiny, poisoned dart. She directed the conversation, effortlessly guiding it toward my background, my family's humble, middle-class existence, my scholarship-funded education. Every answer I gave seemed to be the wrong one. When I mentioned my parents lived in Ohio, she gave a little, almost imperceptible, "Ah, Ohio." She said it like it was a terminal diagnosis. Throughout the meal, she'd place her hand on Julian's arm, a small, proprietary gesture. She'd share an inside joke with him, or bring up a memory from his childhood that I couldn't possibly understand, reinforcing the invisible wall between them and me. I was the outsider, the curiosity. The final blow came over dessert, a single raspberry on a plate with some kind of foam. "Julian tells me you do graphic design work to pay the bills," Genevieve said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "It's so important to have a marketable skill to fall back on, isn't it? One can't live on paint and dreams forever." It was a direct hit, delivered with the precision of a sniper. She was telling me, in the clearest possible terms, that I was not good enough. That my life, my passion, my very identity, was a quaint little fantasy, and she was the dragon guarding the gates of this new reality. As we left, she finally took my hand. Her skin was cold, her grip surprisingly strong. "It was illuminating to finally meet you, Alara," she said, and in that moment, I knew I hadn't just met his mother. I had met his queen, and she was not impressed. The dinner with Genevieve was a turning point. After that night, Julian's care for me intensified, becoming more focused, more urgent. He framed it as a response to his mother's snobbery. "I want to protect you from that," he said, his arms wrapped around me in his minimalist, all-white apartment. "I want to give you the freedom to be the artist you were always meant to be, without worrying about money or what people like my mother think." It sounded so noble, so romantic. He was my patron, my champion. I didn't see that he was forging a new set of chains, this time made of gold. His grand idea came a week later. We were in my loft, which was looking increasingly shabby and small compared to his world, and I was stressing over a freelance deadline for a corporate logo. He watched me, a look of profound pity on his face. "My love," he began, taking my hands away from the keyboard. "This is killing your soul. This isn't art. This is commerce. Your talent is being wasted on this drudgery." He gestured around at my life's work as if it were a pile of trash. "I want you to quit," he said. "Quit all of it. I'll take care of everything. Just paint. For me, for yourself." I hesitated. My freelance work wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. It paid my bills. It was my independence. "I don't know, Julian. That's a big step." He sighed, a theatrical gesture of disappointment. "Don't you trust me, Alara? Don't you believe that I believe in you?" He made it about trust, about love. How could I say no? Arguing for my right to design logos for plumbing companies felt so small, so ungrateful, in the face of his grand gesture. So, I agreed. I sent the emails, canceled the contracts, and turned my back on the only career I had ever known. A terrifying silence descended. For the first time in my adult life, I had no income. The next step was streamlining our finances. He made it sound like a sexy, modern thing to do. "We're a team now," he said, pulling out a sheaf of papers from a sleek leather briefcase. "It doesn't make sense for us to have separate accounts. Let's make it simple." He opened a joint checking account, into which he deposited a staggering sum of money. He handed me a debit card with my name on it. "For paints, for canvases, for inspiration," he said with a flourish. "Anything you need, it's all yours." But when I looked at the paperwork, his was the primary name on the account. Mine was secondary. I was essentially a user with permission, not an owner. Then came the bigger stack of documents. "Just some standard financial planning stuff," he said breezily, uncapping a heavy, expensive-looking pen. "My family's wealth manager says it's the smart way to protect our assets." He flipped through pages filled with dense legal jargon: trusts, holding companies, powers of attorney. My eyes glazed over. He pointed to the signature lines. "Sign here, here, and here." I paused, the pen hovering over the paper. "Shouldn't I read this?" He let out a soft, wounded chuckle. "Elara, darling, do you really want to spend our beautiful afternoon reading legal documents? Or do you want to get back to your studio? This is my world. Let me handle it. I'm protecting you." He leaned in and kissed me. The kiss was deep, passionate, and completely distracting. It was a magic trick. Look here, at our love, not there, at the fine print. So I signed. I signed it all. I signed away my financial independence, my legal autonomy, and I didn't even know it. I just thought I was signing up for a life of love and art. For about a month, the arrangement felt like a dream. I woke up late, drank expensive coffee, and walked into my now pristine studio, which Julian had professionally redesigned. I had every tool, every color, every canvas I could ever want. The financial anxiety that had been my constant companion for a decade was gone. But something else was gone too, the spark, the frantic, hungry energy that came from creating something out of nothing, of making art because I had to, not because I could. Now, my art felt recreational. The canvases stayed blank. The paints stayed in their tubes. I was a painter who didn't paint. The silence in my studio seemed to amplify the silence in my life. With no work deadlines and fewer calls from friends who were tired of my cancellations and couldn't relate to my new life, my world had shrunk to the size of Julian. His moods dictated the weather. His approval was the sun. I found myself dressing for him, speaking for him, curating my own thoughts to please him. The feeling of being adored was replaced by the constant, low-grade hum of needing to be adorable. The fairy tale shattered on a Tuesday. It was over something so stupid, so insignificant, that I can barely say it out loud. I had bought the wrong kind of olives. He liked Castelvetrano olives, bright green and buttery. I had bought Kalamata, dark purple and briny. We were having his parents over for drinks, a rare event in our own apartment, and I had been desperate to get everything perfect. He saw the bowl on the counter. "What are these?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Olives," I said, trying for a light tone. "I thought I'd get the Kalamata for a change." He didn't yell. Yelling would have been a relief. Instead, a chilling stillness came over him. He picked up one of the purple olives with his fingertips, holding it as if it were a dead insect. "You thought," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Did you? Or did you just not listen? I have told you, countless times, that I like Castelvetrano olives. It is not a difficult concept, Alara. Green, not purple." His eyes were flat, devoid of any of the warmth I had fallen in love with. I felt a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. "Julian, it's just olives. I'll run out and get the other kind." "No," he said, placing the olive back in the bowl with surgical precision. Leave them. I want my parents to see them. My blood ran cold. What? Why? He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw the monster. It wasn't in his face. It was behind his eyes. A cold, calculating intelligence that was enjoying this. Because it's a perfect metaphor, isn't it? For your lack of attention to detail. For your carelessness. I give you everything. I build this entire world for you, and you can't even be bothered to remember the simplest, most basic detail about me. Does any of what I tell you actually get through? Or are you just, what? Stupid? The word hit me like a physical blow. Stupid. He had never spoken to me like that. My hands started to tremble. Don't call me stupid. Then don't act stupid, he hissed, his face inches from mine. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? To bring my mother here, and you can't even get the olives right. What is she going to think? That I've attached myself to an incompetent child? Tears welled in my eyes, born of shock and humiliation. I started to apologize, to babble about being sorry. And as I did, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Victory. He had broken me. He watched me cry for a moment. Then his face softened, the mask sliding back into place. He pulled me into a hug. "Oh, my sweet, sensitive girl," he murmured into my hair. "I'm sorry. I'm just stressed. It's not about the olives. I just want everything to be perfect for you." It was whiplash. My mind was reeling. In the space of 5 minutes, he had dismantled me, and then reassembled me as a victim he needed to comfort. The fairy tale wasn't just dead. He had just shown me its grave. After the olive incident, a new and terrifying pattern emerged. Julian would create a problem, watch me unravel, and then swoop in to solve it with affection and feigned remorse. He'd hide my car keys and then help me find them after I'd had a full-blown panic attack about being late for one of our engagements. He'd accidentally delete a file I was working on. I had started trying to design again, in secret, and then spend all night with his tech guy recovering it for me. Each event left me more frayed, more dependent, and more grateful for his help. I was living in a constant state of confusion, my own memory becoming a landscape I could no longer trust. My attempts to reclaim some independence were met with this insidious psychological warfare. When I suggested taking a weekend trip to visit Amelia, Julian's face clouded over with concern. "Of course, my love, if that's what you think you need." The next day, I woke up feeling dizzy and nauseous. "You look pale," he said, pressing the back of his cool hand to my forehead. "I think you're coming down with something. You've been so stressed." "You really should rest." The symptoms were real. My stomach was in knots. My head was pounding, but they were symptoms of anxiety, not a flu. But he nurtured me, brought me tea, and convinced me I was too sick to travel. I canceled on Amelia, who sounded more distant and disappointed than ever. Another thread to my old life, snipped. The final act of this particular play began when I told him I thought we needed some space. Not a breakup, I explained carefully, but just a little room to breathe. Maybe I could spend a few nights a week back at my old loft. The words had barely left my mouth before his expression shifted into one of deep, profound sorrow. He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. "I knew this was coming," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've failed you. You're unhappy." Genevieve was right. He brought his mother into it. That was the master stroke. Later that day, Genevieve called. Her voice dripped with manufactured sympathy. "Elara, darling, Julian told me you're not feeling yourself. He's so worried. We're all so worried about you." I tried to explain that I was fine, that I just needed some time alone, but my words were twisted into evidence of my instability. "It's perfectly normal to feel overwhelmed," she cooed. "Sometimes, when one's life changes so dramatically, the mind can have trouble adjusting. It's nothing to be ashamed of." That evening, Julian and Genevieve sat me down on my own white sofa. It felt like an intervention. "Elara," Julian began, taking my hand. His was firm and warm, mine was cold and clammy. "We love you. And because we love you, we can't stand by and watch you suffer." Genevieve nodded grimly. "You've been erratic, forgetful. You have these emotional outbursts over small things. We think it would be wise for you to talk to someone, to get a professional perspective." I recoiled. "A therapist? I don't need a therapist." "Not a therapist, darling," Genevieve corrected gently. "A psychiatrist." "We know a wonderful man, Dr. Alistair Finch. He's the best in his field. He's done wonders for some of our friends." My heart hammered against my ribs. A psychiatrist. The word was a weapon. They weren't just saying I was sad or confused. They were saying I was mentally ill. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about codifying my instability, getting a professional to label me as unreliable. If I was officially unstable, who would ever believe my version of events? "He's a family friend," Julian added, as if that were a comfort. "He's already agreed to see you. We've made an appointment for you on Friday. Is less than has on. 5's number is greater than." They hadn't asked, they had decided. The gilded cage had shrunk. Now, it had a padded room. The appointment with Dr. Finch loomed like a guillotine. I had 3 days. 3 days until they had a doctor on their payroll ready to sign off on my instability. The fear was a physical thing, a cold stone in the pit of my stomach. But beneath the fear, a tiny, hard kernel of anger was forming. They had overplayed their hand. This wasn't about olives or car keys anymore. This was a calculated, strategic move to discredit me, to take away the one thing I had left, my own mind. And I wasn't going to let them have it. The opportunity came on Thursday. Julian was flying to Zurich for a 4-hour banking thing, as he vaguely put it. He kissed me goodbye, his face a mask of loving concern. "I've asked Genevieve to take you to your appointment tomorrow," he said. "You'll be in good hands." The moment the door clicked shut behind him, the fog of confusion I'd been living in began to clear. His absence was like a pressure valve being released. The house was quiet. I was alone. It was time to fight back. My first thought was his new laptop, the one he used for all his important business. But I knew it would be locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Then I remembered. The old one. The one he had replaced my sticker-covered MacBook with. The one he'd used for the first few weeks we were together before upgrading. He had called it a fresh start. What was he starting fresh from? I found it in the back of his closet, in its original box, tucked under a pile of cashmere sweaters. My heart pounded as I took it out. It felt heavy, like an artifact from a forgotten tomb. I sat at his cold marble desk and booted it up. A password screen appeared. My stomach sank. Of course. But then, I looked at the hint, the name of my first conquest. A wave of nausea hit me. He was so arrogant, so sure of himself. I tried my name. Alara. Access denied. I thought back to our first conversations, the way he'd seemed to know so much about art. I typed in a long shot, the name of a famous artist's muse, Dora Maar. Access denied. Then a colder thought hit me. What if it wasn't a person? What if it was a thing? The first big piece of art he ever bought. I remembered the story he told me, about a small bronze statue of a horse he'd acquired at auction. He'd named it Bucephalus. I typed it in. The screen flickered and the desktop appeared. I was in. For the first hour, I found nothing. Old emails, business proposals, boring spreadsheets. I was starting to think I was just paranoid. Then I found it. A hidden folder, named simply Projects. Inside were subfolders. Each one was a woman's name. Camilla, Sophie, Isabel, and then, at the bottom, Alara. My blood turned to ice. I clicked on my folder. It was a digital dossier. It had my social media profiles, notes on my friends, my favorite restaurants, my family's address. It had a list of my insecurities, fears financial instability, craves validation for her art, desperate for a grand romance. It was a blueprint of my soul. But the real horror was in the other folders. Each one contained a similar file. And then I found the master document. It was a file named Playbook. Every single thing he had done to me, laid out in cold, clinical detail. It wasn't a romance that had gone sour, it was a military operation. And then I saw the final folder, one that gave me a sliver of hope amidst the horror. It was titled Templates. Inside were the exact legal documents I had signed, unsigned boilerplate templates. He hadn't just done this before, he had a system, he had a kit, and I finally had the proof. Trusting your gut is a survival skill. Hit like if you believe in the power of intuition. It's the only thing that can cut through a lie that perfect. The discovery on the laptop changed everything. The fear didn't vanish, but it crystallized into something cold, hard, and sharp. Rage. The whimpering victim he had so carefully cultivated was gone, and in her place was an artist who had just been handed the most horrifying, motivating subject of her life. I wasn't going to have a breakdown. I was going to build a case. For the next 12 hours, I worked with a focus I hadn't felt in months. I was no longer Alara, the confused girlfriend. I was Alara, the forensic archivist of my own destruction. My artistic eye for detail, the very thing he'd praised and then tried to weaponize against me, became my greatest asset. I didn't just read the playbook. I photographed every single word on the screen with my old, cracked screen Android, a device he hadn't controlled. I documented the file paths, the creation dates, the metadata. I recorded videos of me navigating through the folders, proving they weren't something I had created. I cross-referenced the names in the other folders, Camilla, Sophie, Isabel, with his social media history, finding pictures of him with these women, each one lasting for a period of 6 to 8 months before they vanished. It was a pattern. His whole life was a template. Then, I turned to the finances. I logged into the joint account he'd so generously set up. I couldn't move the money, but I could track it. I downloaded every statement, every transaction. I highlighted the gifts he'd bought me, the jewelry, the clothes, the trips, all purchased from this joint account. It wasn't his money he was spending on me. It was our money, legally speaking. The financial entanglement wasn't just a cage for me. It could be a trap for him. I photographed the unsigned legal templates next to the signed copies he had tucked away in his office safe, the combination to which I had guessed weeks ago. It was, pathetically, his own birthday. The evidence was overwhelming. He hadn't just been a bad boyfriend, he'd been committing fraud. With a mountain of digital evidence saved to a tiny, encrypted thumb drive, my next step was to find an ally. I couldn't go to the police. My word against a powerful family like his, especially with a pending psychiatric evaluation, was a losing battle. I needed a different kind of weapon. I needed a lawyer, but not his kind of lawyer. I needed a shark who understood the murky waters of domestic abuse that doesn't leave bruises. I remembered a card Amelia had given me months ago, for a woman she'd volunteered with at a shelter. "She's a badass," Amelia had said. "Helps women get out of impossible situations." Using a cheap burner phone I bought with cash from an ATM near my old loft, I called the number. A calm, steady voice answered. "Sasha." I explained my situation in a torrent of whispered words, huddled in the bathroom of a coffee shop, sure that one of Julian's spies was watching me. Sasha listened without interruption. She didn't sound shocked or surprised, which was the most comforting thing in the world. When I was done, a mess of paranoid, jumbled facts, she simply said, "Okay. The first thing you need to do is get out. Do you have a safe place to go?" I thought of my old, dusty loft. It was still in my name. Julian had just been paying the rent from the joint account, a power move I now understood. "Yes," I said. "I think so." "Good," Sasha said, her voice firm. "Don't go back to his apartment. Don't take anything that he can claim is his. Just take yourself, your phone, and whatever evidence you have. We can deal with the rest later. Can you meet me at my office in an hour?" An hour. The timeline was suddenly real. The escape was no longer a plan. It was happening. Now, walking out of that apartment was the most terrifying and liberating moment of my life. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't take the designer clothes or the jewelry. I left the vintage Porsche keys on the marble countertop next to the bowl of now shriveled Kalamata olives. I walked out wearing the same jeans and t-shirt I'd worn when I met him, carrying nothing but my old tote bag containing my wallet, my burner phone, and the encrypted thumb drive that held my entire case. I didn't look back. I took the service elevator down, walked out the back entrance, and melted into the anonymity of the city. I was a ghost. Sasha's office was the antithesis of everything Julian represented. It was in a scruffy building, up a flight of rickety stairs, filled with mismatched furniture and stacks of files. It smelled like coffee and justice. Sasha herself was in her 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She wore a worn leather jacket and boots that had seen better days. I handed her the thumb drive like it was a holy relic. She plugged it into her laptop, and for the next hour, she was silent, her eyes scanning the screen, her expression unreadable. I watched her read the playbook, see the names, the financial records, the photos of the legal documents. When she finally looked up, she took a long, slow breath. "Okay," she said, her voice low. "This is bad." Very, very bad, for him. A wave of relief so intense it almost made me dizzy washed over me. She believed me. "This isn't just coercive control, Alara," she continued, tapping the screen. "This is a clear pattern of predatory behavior, financial fraud, and conspiracy. He didn't just groom you, he built a business around it. And the attempt to force you into psychiatric care? That's witness tampering. He knows he's exposed, and he's trying to discredit his victim before she can talk." Our strategy wasn't to have a messy, public confrontation. That's what he would expect. He'd want me to scream and yell so he could paint me as the hysterical, unstable woman from his narrative. Sasha's plan was colder, quieter, and far more brutal. It was a legal sneak attack. We wouldn't be filing for a simple restraining order. We would be launching a full-scale civil lawsuit. We would sue Julian, Genevieve, and their family's holding company for fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and misappropriation of assets. We would use his own meticulous paperwork against him. The joint account, the power of attorney, the templates, it all proved intent. He hadn't just helped me. He had legally entangled me in a way that made him vulnerable. The next morning, while Julian was still in Zurich, a process server walked into his father's corporate headquarters. Another one arrived at the Park Avenue apartment, handing a thick envelope to a very confused Genevieve. There was no dramatic phone call from me, no tearful email. Just the cold, hard slap of a lawsuit being served. Instead of me showing up for my psychiatric evaluation with Dr. Finch, Finch received a notice from Sasha that he was now a material witness in a civil fraud case, and any attempt to treat or diagnose me would be seen as a continuation of the conspiracy. We had flipped the script. I was no longer the patient, I was the plaintiff. The silence from Julian was deafening. I was hidden away in my old loft, the door triple-bolted, living on pizza Amelia brought me. My phone, my real one, started blowing up. But it wasn't Julian, it was his father's lawyers. They wanted to talk. They wanted to make this go away. They were terrified. His playbook never accounted for this. It never imagined that one of his projects would find a lawyer, gather evidence, and use his own tactics against him. He had expected a breakup. He got a lawsuit. The reversal was complete. The hunter was now the hunted. The legal battle was nothing like the dramatic courtroom scenes you see on television. There were no surprise witnesses or impassioned speeches to a jury. It was a war fought in silence, through motions, affidavits, and brutally expensive billable hours. Julian's family threw their immense wealth at the problem, hoping to bury me in paperwork and bleed me dry. But they underestimated two things: the quality of Sasha's evidence and the fact that she was working pro bono, fueled by righteous fury. She couldn't be bought, and she wouldn't be intimidated. Their first move was to try and discredit me. Their lawyers filed a motion to have me submit to an independent psychiatric evaluation. Sasha's response was a masterclass. She agreed, on the condition that Julian also be evaluated by the same psychiatrist, and that his evaluation include a review of the playbook and his digital history with the other women. They withdrew the motion the next day. Their second move was to claim the legal documents I'd signed were ironclad, that I had willingly entered into the financial agreements. Sasha countered by deposing the other women. Sophie and Isabel, both now married and living quiet lives, were terrified to speak at first. But when Sasha showed them the playbook, showed them their own names in the folders, and made them realize they were part of a pattern, their fear turned to anger. Their sworn affidavits, detailing experiences that mirrored my own almost word for word, were the nails in Julian's coffin. The final negotiation took place in a sterile conference room in a downtown skyscraper. It was the first time I had seen Julian since he'd left for Zurich. He looked smaller. The arrogant charm was gone, replaced by a sullen, petulant anger. He wouldn't make eye contact. Genevieve was there, a pillar of icy rage, her face a frozen mask of hatred. She looked at me as if I were a cockroach she'd found in her soup. My team was just me and Sasha. Their lead attorney, a man with silver hair and a soulless smile, started by offering a generous settlement to make this all go away. A one-time payment, in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement so restrictive, I wouldn't be able to say Julian's name out loud for the rest of my life. Sasha just smiled. "We're not interested in your client's money," she said, her voice calm and even. "My client has only two demands. 1. A complete and total unwinding of every financial and legal document she was coerced into signing. Every power of attorney, every joint account, every trust agreement voided. She walks away with her own name and her own bank account, free and clear." The lawyer nodded. "That can be arranged." "And 2, Sasha continued, leaning forward, "he gives her back her art." Julian's head snapped up. "What? No, I bought that. It's mine." "You purchased it with funds from an account that we are contending was established fraudulently," Sasha said coolly. "It's a fruit of the poisonous tree, and we want it back. My client doesn't want your money, she wants her soul back. That painting is her soul." This, I realized, was the masterstroke. It wasn't about the monetary value, it was about the principle, forcing him to give back the very first thing he had used to trap me. It was the ultimate symbolic victory. After a furious, whispered argument between Julian, Genevieve, and their lawyers, they agreed. We sat there, in that cold room, and I watched as their army of lawyers drew up the new documents. This time, I read every single word. It was a document of dissolution, of emancipation. It was an unsigning. As I put my pen to the paper, my hand was perfectly steady. I wasn't signing my life away. I was taking it back. After it was done, Genevieve stood up, walked over to me, and leaned in close. "You will regret this," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "We will destroy you. I looked her straight in the eye, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. "You can't destroy a ghost," I said. Then I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her and her broken prints in the ruins of their own making. The days following the unsigning were strangely quiet. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Genevieve's promised destruction to rain down upon me, but nothing happened. The silence was absolute. It turned out that people like Julian and his family, who live in the spotlight, fear nothing more than a scandal they can't control. The threat of the Playbook going public was enough to guarantee their silence. They hadn't been defeated in a battle. They had been checkmated. Their king was trapped, and their only move was to stand still and pretend the game never happened. A week later, a crate arrived at my loft. Inside, carefully wrapped, was my painting. Seeing it again was like seeing a ghost of myself. The artist who had painted it was so full of hope, so naive, so hungry for a love that would sweep her off her feet. I had been swept, all right. Swept into a storm that had nearly torn me apart. I unwrapped the painting and set it on my easel, but I couldn't look at it. The memories were too raw. Instead, I took a large, fresh canvas and mounted it next to the old one. A blank canvas, full of possibility. Life found a new rhythm. A quiet, peaceful, gloriously boring rhythm. I woke up to the sound of city traffic, not to a manufactured crisis. I drank cheap coffee and ate oatmeal for breakfast. Amelia and my other friends, once they understood the whole story, enveloped me in a fierce, protective circle of love. There were no apologies needed, just shared pizzas and late-night talks that healed the parts of me the lawyers couldn't touch. I started working again. I took on small freelance jobs, reveling in the satisfaction of earning my own money, of seeing my own name on an invoice. My loft, which had once felt like a symbol of my failure, now felt like a fortress of my own making. Every scuff on the floor, every paint splatter on the wall, was a testament to my own survival, my own work. One day, I took out my old, cracked Android phone. I looked at the dark screen, the device that had become my lifeline, the one that held the first photographic evidence of Julian's lies. I held it for a moment, then walked over to the trash and dropped it in. I drove to the phone store and bought a new phone, in my own name, on my own plan. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. I never heard from Julian or his family again. Through the grapevine, I heard he'd moved to London. I could almost picture it. A new city, a new hunting ground, a new name being added to a folder on his laptop. The thought no longer filled me with fear, but with a deep, profound pity for the next woman who would find him too good to be true. One sunny afternoon, months later, I was in my studio. I finally took down the old painting, the one he had bought, and wrapped it up. I put it in the back of my closet. It wasn't my soul anymore. It was just a souvenir from a foreign country I never wanted to visit again. I turned to the blank canvas that had been sitting there for months. I picked up a piece of charcoal, and for the first time an image came to mind. Not a sweeping, romantic landscape, but a portrait, a self-portrait. My hand was steady as I made the first mark. I didn't know what it would look like when it was finished, but I knew one thing for sure. The story it told would be my own. If my story can help even one person recognize the red flags, it's worth it. The playbook is real, and the tactics are ancient. But so is our resilience. Please share this video and join our community by subscribing. You are not alone, and you are more powerful than you know.